Good evening. So glad you chose to join with us this evening. A couple of things. I'm going to do something different I've never done. Not stand here. I'm still going to move. Hey, John, turn this down a little bit. This lapel mic. Mic 2. Keep going. That should be good. Maybe up just a hair more. I could just hear it really echoey. That was driving me crazy. I am going to stay in one section of Scripture. So if you got a Bible in front of you, you want to turn over to Kings chapter 12. We're going to be right there in that Kings chapter 12, chapter 14 section the entire time tonight. And we're going to talk about Rehoboam. We're going to talk about Rehoboam. We're going to talk about lessons from Rehoboam. We're going to talk about the life of Rehoboam, what happened to him, kind of how he served. But before we do that, have some wisdom. So we're going to see wisdom and we're going to learn about some wisdom from Rehoboam. And I learned this 2 weeks ago. Didn't know this before in my life, and I found this by accident. And so I want to share it with you. It has nothing to do with Scripture, a little bit to do with spirituality, and I'll explain that in just a second. If you're ever using a weed eater and you're going up against a chain link fence, slow your weed eater down. I was always one of these full bore, throttle to the metal, and just the fence would chew my weed eater string up. Then I'd have to stop, go back and rewind my weed eater and try it again, and it infuriated me. And I despise this. So, the spirituality part, this will make you less angry in your life. If you slow down and just do it real, it's kind of like a finesse thing. Let your weed eater run real slow and go from there. So, that's the word of advice. I don't know how I got to 52 without learning that. So if somebody knew that, I wish they would have told me that years ago. So if you didn't know that, I now have shared that with you. Okay. Let's talk about Rehoboam. First thing I want to do is let's talk about the setting of Rehoboam. And that's kind of where our scripture reading comes from tonight. Our scripture reading in Kings chapter 11. So by the way, Rehoboam is Solomon's son, not Jeroboam's brother. I thought that for years. I thought Jeroboam and Rehoboam were twins. But they're not. They're not even related. Jeroboam and Rehoboam were together at the same time. Jeroboam was a minister in Solomon's kingdom, in his entourage, and Rehoboam was Solomon's son. So we find in 1 Kings chapter 11, we find the end of Solomon's life. And Solomon has been touted as the wisest man that ever lived. And at the end of the life, he kind of hit this downward spiral. So we see in 1 Kings chapter 11 that Solomon dies at the end of it. And Rehoboam takes over as king. That's how chapter 11 of 1 Kings ends. It ends with the death of Solomon. Before that, what we see is Solomon reigned for 40 years, and that's an important number. So we'll come back to this 40-year number here in just a little bit. And that he turned away from God to foreign women. We see that in the reading that Jim talked about. And then we also see that God decreed to take the kingdom away from Solomon. But he said in doing this that he wouldn't do it during his time because of his father David. David was a man after God's own heart. Solomon was his son. Rehoboam was his son. And God tells Solomon, because of your father David, I'm not going to rip the kingdom away from you, but I'm going to take it out of the hands of your son. And so that Solomon knew that going throughout the rest of his life. I don't know exactly from the time he was given that decree to the end of his life. I don't know the length of time that he knew this. But we can see that the end of Solomon's life ended in turmoil and fighting. So Jeroboam was told by a prophet that this was going to happen. There was, a cloth, and he tore out 12 pieces, gave 10 to Jeroboam, and explained to him, you're going to take over the kingdom of Israel. It's going to be ripped out of the hand of Rehoboam, Solomon's son. And Solomon learned of this, and spent the rest of his time trying to kill Jeroboam. So Jeroboam fled, and Solomon finished out the rest of his life. So this is the setting that we find Rehoboam in. This is a little bit beforehand, leading up to his life. All right, so that brings us to the story. So in the story of Rehoboam, which is in 1 Kings 12, verse 1 through 24, here's the things we're going to see, and then we're actually going to read the entire 24 verses. And this is another thing I don't do a lot. I don't do a lot of lengthy reading, but I really feel that the way we want to approach this today, I think it'll be good for us to read this. So we find in this story, we will see Rehoboam's faced with a choice. And that the people that he's got this choice among were people that he grew up with. Because Rehoboam was 41 years old when he took the throne. Now think about that. Solomon reigned for 40 years. Rehoboam was 41 when he took the throne. His entire life, he saw his father's reign. He saw his grandfather, because Solomon, his father, and David, his grandfather, were the influencing guys in Rehoboam's life. So we see the leadership of David, the repentful heart, the man after God's own heart, and Solomon, the wisest man that ever lived, were the two patriarchs of Rehoboam. And so he saw this and he knew this. And so Israel, at this time, I did some looking. So it's like, how many people are we talking about? The best guess I can come up with is about 2 million people in Israel. So Rehoboam, when he's faced with this choice, he has about 2 million people that this impacts. Which I was impressed. I thought, man, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people, and this is a big choice for him. So what we're going to do is I want to look at the story. So if you're with me in Kings chapter 12, 1 Kings chapter 12, sorry about that. We'll start in verse 1. 1 Kings chapter 12, starting in verse 1, it says, "And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone to Shechem to make him king. And it so happened when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard it, for he was still in Egypt, for he had fled from the presence of King Solomon and had been dwelling in Egypt, that they sent and called him. Then Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, Your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the burdensome service of your father and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will serve you. So then he said to them, Depart for 3 days, and come back to me. And the people departed. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who stood before his father Solomon while he still lived. And he said, How do you advise me to answer these people? And they spoke to him, saying, If you will be a servant to these people today, and serve them, and answer them, and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever. But he rejected the advice which the elders had given him, and consulted the young men who had grown up with him, who stood before him. And he said to them, What advice do you give? How should we answer these people who have spoken to me, saying, Lighten the yoke your father put on us? Then the young men who had grown up with him and spoke to him, saying, Thus you should speak to this people who have spoken to you, saying, Your father made our yoke heavy, but you make it lighter on us. Thus you shall say to them, My little finger shall be thicker than my father's waist. And now, whereas my father put a heavy yoke on you, I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam on the 3rd day, as the king had directed, saying, Come back to me the 3rd day. Then the king answered the people roughly, and rejected the advice which the elders had given him. And he spoke to them according to the advice of young men, saying, My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges. So the king did not listen to the people, for the turn of events was from the Lord, that he might fulfill his word, which the Lord spoken by Ahijah, the Shilonite, to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Now when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered, saying, What share have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now see to your own house, O David. So Israel departed to their tents, but Rehoboam reigned over the children of Israel who dwelt in the cities of Judah. Then the king Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was in charge of revenue, but all of Israel stoned him with stones, and he died. Therefore King Rehoboam mounted his chariot in haste to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. Now it came to pass when all Israel heard that Jeroboam had came back, they sent for him and called him to the congregation and made him king over Israel. There was none who followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. And when Rehoboam came to Jerusalem, he assembled with the house of Judah, with the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 chosen men who were warriors, to fight against the house of Israel, that he might restore the kingdom to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. But the word of God came to Shemaiah, the man of God, saying, Speak to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, the king of Judah, to all the house of Judah and Benjamin, and to the rest of the people, saying, Thus says the Lord, You shall not go up and fight against your brethren, the children of Israel. Let every man return to his house, for this thing is from me. Therefore they obeyed the word of the Lord, and turned back according to the word of the Lord. There's something I saw in here, and it just popped out. This may be a little dangerous. Interestingly, I caught this during the reading, and I don't know how much this plays into it. But if you look into verse 7, actually into verse 6, when he's talking to the wise men, he said, How do you advise me to answer these people? But if you look down when he was talking to the young men, he says to the young men, he says, How should we answer these people? So it's interesting, there seemed to be a separation between two. And I didn't see that when I was putting this together. So a little side point, I don't know that plays into this, but it plays a little bit into what happened. Because I think we all know the story that the wisdom of the old guys was rejected. And I think in there you can see the kind of where his allegiance felt to him. So anyway, let's jump into this. There's some good that Rehoboam did in this. There's some wisdom in this. So I want to give him a little bit of credit for the stuff that was good. The first thing he did that was good, he stopped. He stopped and he took time to make a decision. Jeff is a big acronym guy, and so he talks to us about this acronym HALT. He says we're hungry, angry, lonely, not lazy, or tired. He said when you're in this stage, you should not make any quick decisions because your decisions are affected by your state of being, your emotion. And so one of the best things Solomon did is he stopped and said, not Solomon, Rehoboam. One of the things he did, he stopped and said, give me 3 days. Let me contemplate this. Let me get some advice. So then what he did, he's like, okay, I need to consult some people. So he went and collaborated with wise guys. The guys that served with his father, that were connected to David, that he saw wisdom in this. And I think a lot of us in this group tonight can think at times when you had a decision to make, you go talk to people that you feel are wise to get some feedback. And interestingly enough, a lot of times, there's things that get said to you that the person that gives you the advice doesn't realize that the impact, doesn't realize how you hold on to it, doesn't realize that this is stuck in your brain. These are things that you remember for a long time. So he went and collaborated with these wise guys. And he listened to them. He honestly did. He spent some time and he listened to them, focused on what they said. He gave it some credence. It doesn't say that he didn't listen to them. He took this in advice. And so this shows a little bit of wisdom and maturity. Again, Rehoboam's father and grandfather were David and Solomon. So he had some good examples of how to process information, how to approach people. And this was a big decision. So he spent some time and he looked into how should he answer. But let's look at the bad stuff, because there was some bad stuff that he did. So ultimately, he rejected the wise counsel. It says in there that he rejected it. It's interesting, it says he rejected the wise counsel, then he went to the people he grew up with. So then we did some more collaborations. So, okay, I didn't like that answer, so I'm going to go talk to these guys I grew up with. Now, think about this if you would. Rehoboam was 40 years old when he took the throne. And this seems to be shortly after. It wasn't a long period of time. He went to the wise people. Then he went to the guys he grew up with. How old were these guys? They were probably in their 40s, maybe in their 30s. He didn't go to a bunch of 12-year-olds. He went to the guys that were grown. So what would you picture? So if you put this in today's society, what do these guys do there? I mean, we make fun of guys that, don't grow up, but, live in their parents' basement, and they're deadbeats, and, they're the guys in their 30s wearing their high school Letterman jackets, trying to be cool. Is that what these guys were? Who were these clowns he went and talked to? What were they doing inside of their lives, inside of Israel? How were they in society? So you can't imagine he went to upbeat guys. He didn't go to business leaders in society. He didn't go to upstanding servants in the society. I picture this as he went to the kind of the lowest, unproductive people society that are just milking off the system. That's kind of who I see. And I could be wrong, but that's just what I picture. So then he listened to them. And what did he hear? He heard, ooh, this could be good for me. I'm going to be this big ultimate guy in power. I'm going to be hard on these people. What are they going to do? You can almost see that in his thought process. What are they going to do? I'm the king. I'm the king. You guys are right. I can make this hard on them. We can oppress them. And you can almost imagine that the guys that gave him this advice, they're all like, oh yeah, I'll have you do this, and you guys are going to be my entourage. You'll be my posse. We'll rule the kingdom, and you guys will be by my side. And what we see in this is we see a lot of selfishness. None of this was done by Rehoboam looking at how is this going to affect these people? What's good for them? What's the best thing for them? How am I going to serve them well? Just lesson this morning was all about serving others. Life's short. Serve others well. And you don't see that in Rehoboam. You see, he went about this. It's about me, me, me. What am I going to get out of this? How am I going to be served? How am I going to benefit from this? So now let's also think about Rehoboam. Does anybody remember another key fact about Solomon? The dude was loaded. Solomon was one of the wealthiest men in history. Where did all that go? The king that took Solomon's place got all the stuff that went with it. So he didn't need money. He didn't need possessions. And he ultimately didn't need fame because he was already a person of prominence. He grew up in the hierarchy. He was already a person of notable birth. He came from a great lineage. He had great, parents and grandparents. He was already exalted. So none of that was a need. This was all selfish driven. And this was a power-hungry person that thought, man, this will be great. And he had to make the statement. What are they going to do to me? All right. Let's talk about the result. So what happened? So he went through all of this, and he looked at all of this, and he debated about this, and people came back in 3 days. Jeroboam and all of Israel came back and said, it's been 3 days, what are you going to do? We've made our case, we've asked you what we want you to do. And so then Rehoboam delivered his message of overbearance, his message of arrogance, his message of unwillingness to truly serve his people. To say my finger will be fatter than my father's waist. You know, he whipped you with whips, I'll whip you with scourges, or something along that lines. It is a message of oppression. It's a message of overbearing service, and it's a message of there's no hope in this message. There's no future. There's nothing but servitude and misery was what he basically showed the people of Israel. And so they're like, nope, not going to do it. And their statements. What do we have in the house of David? What do we have? Allegiance to the son of Jesse. We are not going to serve you. And so they revolted. They turned their back on him. And they ran off. They ran to their tents and said, we're done. We're not going to do it. So ultimately, the prophecy of God was fulfilled. When God told Solomon, I'm not going to take this from you. Because God ultimately knew, I don't have to take this to you. For the sake of your father David, because he didn't want David to have to live through this division. He said, "Now I will take this from your son." Because God ultimately knew what was going to happen. Let's take a look at the tragic end of Rehoboam. Flip over with me to the end of chapter 14 in 1 Kings. So then the kind of the mid-story, Jeroboam takes Israel and they go off into debauchery. Rehoboam leads Israel and they're terrible as well. So it starts down the rabbit hole of bad kings of Israel, which continues for a long time. So 1 Kings 14, starting in verse 21. And Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he became king. He reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. His mother's name was Nehemiah, the Ammonitess. And Judah did evil in the sight of the Lord, and they provoked him to jealousy with their sins which they had committed, more than all their fathers had ever done. For they also built for themselves high places, sacred pillars, and wooden images on every hill and under every green tree. And they were also perverted persons in the land. They did according to all the abominations of the nations of which the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel. And it happened in the 5th year, the king Rehoboam, that Shishak, the king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem. And he took away the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house. He took away everything. He also took away the gold shields which Solomon had made. Then the king Rehoboam made bronze shields in their place, and committed them to the hands of the captains of the guards, who guarded the doorway to the king's house. Whenever the king entered the house of the Lord, the guards carried them and brought them back into the guard room. Now the rest of the acts of Rehoboam and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And there was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam all their days. So Rehoboam rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David, and his mother's name was Nehemiah, the Ammonitess. Then Abijam, his son, reigned in his place. So we look at the tragic end of Rehoboam. He started out with a lot of promise, a great opportunity. But through his own selfishness and through his own desire and through his own selfish will, he ended in 17 years of fighting and misery and debauchery, not serving God, and started a path for Israel that went through a terrible history. So let's talk a little bit about leadership. Rehoboam was an autocratic leader. What that means is it's all about him. I'm demanding. What I say goes. There is no we. There is no reasoning. There is no logic. There is no explanation. I say do it. You say you do it. You don't question me. That was his leadership style, which is a very harsh form of leadership. And that's what we see in this story. We see harsh leadership. A couple of facts. We all lead someone. So if you look at this autocratic leadership style, and what we can learn from this story is there's always someone watching us. And you may not realize, sometimes we don't realize who we're leading, but we all lead someone. So make sure that while we are doing this, while we're living this life, that we're doing it well. We don't have this autocratic style. We have a very open, a very conversational leadership style. Because how we serve people matters. How Rehoboam served his people mattered. It would be amazing if you could go back and change the heart of Rehoboam. What does that story look like? What does that story look like? Does it change? How long does it change? Will be a fascinating discussion. And then his actions. His actions, he started out seeking out wise instruction, seeking out wise help. He started out seeking information. But who are we seeking out? Do we seek out those in our lives that are wise and add into our lives? Or do we do this a lot for ourselves? And then do we truly listen? So I said Solomon went and he listened to the wise counsel. I would love to see the interaction. Was it immediately dismissing? Did he consider it for a while? How well did he truly take in that interaction with them? And then truly do our actions show that we look out for what's best for others? Am I interested in me, my advancement? Am I interested in what's good for others? So at the end of the day, results are a formula of our leadership and our actions. When you look at Rehoboam, look at his results. We sow what we reap. He reaped a very harsh initial start. And you can imagine he lived a very harsh life, a very tough life, a very unfulfilling life. Can you imagine being at war all 17 years? Can you imagine not knowing what's around that corner? Who wants to kill you next? Because this was it wasn't a very great environment. So there was continually war between him and Jeroboam. And the amazing thing is, when we look at this, is God knows what's going to happen. God knew what was going to happen when he told Solomon, I'm going to take this away from your son. He knew this was going to happen. And God knows what's going to happen in each and every one of our lives. Now, we have the opportunity to make the choices, do the things we want. But God knows what our choices are going to be. He can look and roll out the thing and go, this is the life of Aaron Ruddick. Here's the decisions. He's going to preach this lesson on Rehoboam. It's going to be great. People are going to love it. It's amazing. He knew that. And he knows all the way down to the end of our life what's going to happen. Fascinating that we get to run the race. We get to live the life. And God knows what's going to happen. But ultimately, this is a story of treating people badly doesn't end well. What's the story of Rehoboam? A young man, 40 years old, that had an opportunity to serve people. And he chose to treat them poorly. And it ended with 17 years of misery, 17 years of constant fighting, and ultimately a life of no satisfaction. Amazingly enough, The Son of God came to this earth. Jesus Christ came. And people didn't listen to him. But he didn't do stuff heavy-handed. He came with love and compassion. And he said, come unto me. I'll make it light. Come unto me. I'll make it better. Come unto me. I'll give you a path to eternity. And people rejected him. And people turned on him. But he didn't turn against them for that. He said, I will love you enough to give up my life. I'll love you enough to pave the path. I love you enough to go make mansions. I mean, we call them mansions. I have no idea what that looks like. But I'm kind of excited to be there and find out. But he says, I make mansions. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to give you a home where there will be no anger, no fighting, no wars, no darkness. Everything will be light. And we won't have the fights we have here. Because at the end of the day, when we get there, God makes it all pure and holy. It was an amazing day. So hopefully you've learned a little bit from the story of Rehoboam. Hopefully you've seen that, this Old Testament character, there's a lot of lessons in this that we can live today. So, seek out wise counsel, serve people well, and remember, God knows what's going to happen. So let's make the end of his story one that he looks at and goes, well done. You did well. We can help you in any way. Please come as we stand and as we sing.
I hear thy welcome voice that calls me, Lord, to thee, for cleansing in thy precious blood that flowed on Calvary. I am coming, Lord, coming now to thee. Wash me, cleanse me in the blood that flowed on Calvary. Though coming weak and vile, thou dost my strength assure. Thou dost my burdens fully cleanse, till spotless all am pure. I am coming, Lord, coming now to thee. Wash me, cleanse me in the blood that flowed on Calvary. 'Tis Jesus calls me on to perfect faith and love, to perfect hope and peace and trust, for earth and heaven above. I am coming, Lord, coming now to thee. Wash me, cleanse me in the blood that flowed on Calvary. Be seated, please.